Here we go with the Dark Ascension pack, and we have Niblis of the Urn next to Towergeist as the best uncommons, and it seems like this is a pack that's quite strong for white-blue, white being accompanied by Niblis of the Mist, Silverclaw Griffin, and the Loyal Cathar as one of the good ground creatures. Towergeist has Saving Grasp and Stormbound Geist as well, so there's only one black card, couple of red cards that aren't too great, a green card which is mostly a sideboard card. So lots of people are going to draft white cards behind us, and I think Towergeist is better than all the white cards anyway. So I think we should pick this up, but maybe we'll have to be careful if we want to move into white after such a pack. Next up, our neighbor took the rare, passing us Strangleroot Geist, Scorned Villager, Midnight Guard, and quite a weak pack overall. So Strangleroot Geist has to be the strongest card in this pack, and I think that the Scorned Villager is probably the second best. Now blue-green is not necessarily a great combination, but I think it's more than playable, and we aren't locked into any of our colors yet. So let's go with this. And that's a potential third pick, Tragic Slip. Alternatively, we could stay in our colors with Dawntreader Elk, which is better than Village Survivors, I think. Afflicted Deserter, in my opinion, not that great. It's really just a 5/4 if it doesn't destroy an artifact, so I don't think it's one of the better werewolves. Now, Forge Devil is much worse than Tragic Slip, so that's not a decision we have to make here. And Tragic Slip is so much better than Dawntreader Elk that I think we should pick up a third color at this point and see where it goes. We have 2 commons missing from this pack, I believe. No, 1 uncommon and 1 common missing from this pack. So somebody took a common which is not Tragic Slip. It might have been Fires of Undeath, but we don't know about that. Here we have a Seakite in blue, a Recluse in green, and that's basically it, because we don't want to pick up Chosen of Markov or Divination at this point in the draft. So Seakite and Recluse actually have quite similar stats, being 2 3s for 4 that can block flying creatures. The question is if we have any idea which of the colors is going to be more open. We did get the Strangleroot guys, but the pack was missing a rare, so we can't really count on that. We didn't get any blue signals so far because we just simply first picked the Towergeist. Given that the pack, our first pick, had quite a lot of white and blue cards, I think it might be a good idea to pick up the Recluse here and hope that our left neighbors are not going to draft any green cards. Our first pack only had a single Crushing Vine, so it might be possible that this works out in our favor. Of course, it could also go the other way, and would have been better to pick up the green card. But in this case, you just have to decide for one way or the other. So here we have actually quite a lot of cards that we could potentially play. I don't like the Inquisitor very much, and I don't see a reason to go into white after passing the white in pick 1, especially because there is Relentless Scarp and Screeching Scarp in blue, potentially a Highborn Ghoul or Ulvenwald Bear, but I don't like these cards that much. So I think Relentless Scarps is the best card in this pack, and we have picked up a lot of creatures so far, which makes it a strong pick in my opinion. That's a pretty late Loyal Cathar. I like to pick it up earlier than that, but it's not something we're interested in right now. So out of this pack, it's probably the best to pick up Highborn Ghoul, simply because Headless Carp and Chant of the Skifsang are really underwhelming, and we already have 1 creature with the exile cost, so I don't want to pick up bad versions of this. It's clearly the worst of the Scarps compared to the ones in Darkest Dungeon and Innistrad as well. So I'm picking up the Highborn Ghoul, which makes my mana look really awful, but I'm not doing this because I want to play 3 colors, but because I want to play any of the 2 colors. And if we continue to get this many playables, we shouldn't have a problem with that. Here we are getting 2 green cards in Sommerwald Dryad and Trekker's Instinct, and Trekker's Instincts are really great for us because we have the potential to be in blue-green, and then the instincts really shine, giving us a lot of late-game power and graveyard synergies, as well as creatures to exile with the Scarp. So I really love to see this card here. We can get 2 drops later, I think. So this later in the draft, we are still getting solid green creatures. There is an okay blue card as well in Bone to Ash, but the fact that there are still green cards flowing could mean that there simply isn't that many green drafters at the table. And green isn't that strong in Darkest Dungeon anyway, so hopefully we'll get the best green cards of Innistrad in the 2nd and the 3rd booster. So I'm picking up the Dryad here. I think it's just stronger than Bone to Ash. We need some 2 drops, and we are quite likely to be playing green. This is the pack we started with, and there is still an Evolving Wilds, which is nice. Not everybody took white cards because there were, I think, 4 in the pack. Saving Grasp is nice with Tower Geist and Fiend Hunter, but I really only like it if I can play if I'm playing blue and white. Crushing Vines is a nice card, and you could even main deck it, but I think Evolving Wilds is actually nicer because it will guarantee that we could splash the Tragic Slip if we want to. And here there isn't really much. I'm going to take Altar of the Lost simply because my deck might degenerate into some kind of spider spawning deck. It's not looking like it's going to, but it's always a possibility. This is about the time where we can pick up a Chant. If we end up in blue-green, we are going to have to play some kind of removal spells, so I don't think I need a second Altar of the Lost. As I said, it's really unlikely, and the Bear is actually a very fine card. Of course, it gets much better if you can guarantee that your 2 drops trade with the opponent, but even as a 3-mana 2/2, it's an okay card, so I'm happy about that. Now we need to do a color sort. I think we want to be playing green, and we have a tendency towards blue because we have the Instincts, the Geist, and the Scarp, whereas we basically only have Tragic Slip in black, and the Highborn Ghoul if we really need it, but it's a double black card out of a color where we haven't seen many cards yet. So this should guide our decision. So if there was a good green card in this pack, I would love to take it, but as it is, we really only have a Runechanter's Pike, which we can't use, Bonds of Faith, which is in the wrong color, and the best cards are probably Armored Scarp and Abattoir Ghoul. And Armored Scarp could be quite nice with Flashback, and if we go towards a more graveyard based deck, but the Ghoul is of course simply a much stronger card. So I think the Scarp isn't good enough to warrant first picking it here, and I'm going to go with the stronger card. If my deck turns out to be a graveyard based deck, I would much rather have the Armored Scarp, but then I would be relying on getting quite a lot of good cards late anyway, tabling Mulches and maybe getting a late Spider spawning or something like that. And with the Ghoul we now have the option to drop the blue or only splash Tower Geist and the Flashback on Trekker's Instinct, so we are really flexible in that regard. And I think here we are just going for the Guts of Shepherd. It's better than Travel Preps in our deck, and there isn't really anything of interest that is not white in this pack. I don't know why there's so many white cards here, but as we can see, our neighbor once again took a rare, so it's possible that it was just so much better than the alternatives. Next up there is a Deadweight, which is better than Tribute to Hunger by far, and the creatures are only okay and can be picked up later. So Deadweight being another removal spell makes me think that we are more likely to be green-black at the end of the day. But we'll see how it goes. Invisible Stalker, not something we are interested in right now because we don't have any additional equipment. We are looking at a black-green deck anyway, so Vampire Interloper should be the card we need. These packs are not very exciting, but maybe the Festerhide Boar is a nice addition. Let's see how our deck would look like if we simply take out the blue and white and cut the Ultra. Then we see that we don't have a lot of late game stuff, so the Boar should actually be a good addition to our deck. We don't need Think Twice, and this is looking kind of like a playable deck. So next up, there's basically Ambush Viper for us. Not to the Bone, not something we're interested in, and quite late into the Maw of Hell, still not something we need. I'm kind of missing 3 and 5 drops, so we'll have to see that we get some late game cards in the third pack. Now, this pack doesn't really offer anything interesting, but Shimmering Grotto could be used to flashback our Tracker's Instincts and maybe splash Tower Geist, so I think it's easily better than the blue cards or Moon Mist. Now we have two cards to splash something. Here there is Hollowhenge Scavenger, and we are now that far into a black-green deck with a blue splash that we don't really need to consider Deranged Assistant anymore. And the Scavenger is exactly what our curve needed, so I'm happy about that. Let's pick up a Naturalize for the sideboard. And here we have Grave Bramble, or the option to hate something, and I'm actually quite a fan of Grave Bramble in black-green decks. I'm not exactly sure why that works out, but it does quite a lot of stuff for you, and you can combine it with Prey Upon and some other cards, so I might even play it if I don't get enough creatures. And the Spider should be a nice additional 5-drop for us, especially because we are not going to be able to play this. So passing 3 good cards, but the Spider is good for us. So this is interesting. All of these cards are okay, or could even be good, but of course we are not a deck that wants Memory's Journey, so we could just take out the Occultist here and hope that we don't play against some deck that can make good use out of it. Okay, now after the second pack, it's about time to check how our deck would look like. So let's hide everything we are not going to play, and then we can see what our deck is missing. Now, of course, in the best case, I'm not playing any of these cards, but then we see that we probably won't be able to simply play with only 1 3-drop. So this is what we should really prioritize in the third pack. There is a Scarp Ruinator, which is a double blue, so and it's quite expensive as well. The additional cost is not to be underestimated in limited. So despite there being some nice cards in Scarp Ruinator and Burning Vengeance and whatnot, I think we have to take one of the solid green cards we have here, and that's basically the decision between Avacyn's Pilgrim and Villagers of Estwald. So I believe, well, we could be splashing the flashback on Travel Preparations, but even then I don't really like it in this kind of deck. So I think we should just go for a solid creature. I usually love Avacyn's Pilgrim, but this deck is weird in that we are not trying to ramp up into a 3-drop because we don't have any so far. So it's much worse than in other green decks. And we are playing 3 colors, but none of them is white. So I'm actually rather have the Villagers of Estwald as a 3-drop here. And there would be another Villagers as another 3-drop, but we did find a Prey Upon, which of course is a very good addition to the deck we are drafting, giving us the option to kill almost arbitrary creatures, because ours are going to be larger. And if they aren't, we can always pass the turn to flip a werewolf. So I think that's an easy choice. Next up we have Lumberknot and the Monstrosity. I'm actually tending towards picking the Monstrosity. Lumberknot is okay, and you can sometimes grow it to large proportions, but there's also the games where it simply doesn't have any impact. And the Monstrosity means that we actually have something enormous for once we reach 7 mana, and the potential to find it with Tracker's Instincts in the late game as well. So picking up the rare here, maybe even tabling Lumberknot. It's unlikely, but it's possible. Now, with the 2 lands, we now have 19 playables right here. So we still need some, in fact, but I also hit some cards that we could potentially play. So I'm not really worried about not getting enough playables. So let's see what would be good in our deck. There is basically the option of Disciple or Altar's Reap, or we could go for another Spider, which I think is much better than the Petrel, despite the Petrel having the potential to just take over a game. The way our deck is shaping up, I don't see many creatures we really want to sack into Altar's Reap, and the same goes for the Disciple. I mean, we can sacrifice creatures to gain life, and to enable Morbid, but our deck isn't that focused on Morbid anyway. If I pick up the Spider and table the Disciple, it's possible that it's ending up in my deck, but right now I need some more good cards first. And speaking of good cards, there's a Moan of the Unhallowed, which is a great card and gives us more late game. It has Flashback, which is good with Tracker's Instincts. There's another Disciple, but Moan is so much better that it's not really an option. And I think we are getting another Villagers. Orchard Spirit is not something we need because we aren't looking at evasion, we are looking to block the opponent's creatures. So the Villagers are good blockers on the ground, and we also have, I think, 3 Spiders to hold the Flyers at bay. So, wow, that's another Scavenger potentially. We don't need a 4-drop, so the Fence Snake is not an option. And Stormgeist, while powerful, is probably too greedy on the splash. I'm not even sure. Well, we're probably just going to play 1 island to enable Towergeist and the Flashback, which should work with our mana. But I don't want a double blue card. So going to pick up the Scavenger here, but I'm not even sure how many 5-drops I'm going to be able to support. And here we could pick up Make-A-Wish. I like it in some matchups more than others, but it's possible that we can board it in at some point. That's a late Pilgrim, which basically tabled. Better than Night Terrors. I don't have any use for the other cards, so nice pickup. Now we really don't need a second Make-A-Wish, so we could take a Dream Twist or an Abbey Griffin. Yeah, let's take the Dream Twist. Who knows, there might be somebody who really wants it. I could pick up the Caravan Vigil, but I'm not looking to play too many cards that look for simply replace lands. So I think Brainweevil is actually the better card. Currently I don't think we can play it in our main deck, but we do have some Morbid synergies, so it's possible that we want it. With 4 Morbid 5-drops, it might be quite good. So here we have the option between Petrel and Disciple. Disciple adds something to our deck which we don't have yet, and we don't need another 5-drop. So let's pick up the Disciple and see if fits into our deck at the end. This is how our deck looks like once we add up all the good cards, and you can see that Tower Geist and Tracker's Instincts are going to be supported by an Island, Evolving Wilds, and Shimmering Grotto, which is quite a nice splash. Should not make our mana much worse and work out quite nicely. It's possible that the Grotto doesn't allow us to drop one of our 2-drops or double colored 2-drops on turn 2, but we have so many 2-drops that it's also okay to play them a turn later. And Eversen's Pilgrim could actually be used to activate the Grotto turn 2 also. Now, this is 25 cards, so we are going to have to cut 2, and if we do that, we are playing 17 lands and Eversen's Pilgrim with quite a lot of ways to generate card advantage and to prevent us from flooding. So we have Mono of the Unhallowed, Tower Geist, and Tracker's Instincts, which basically make sure that we don't run out of steam. And we also have the Monstrosity and quite a lot of 5-drops to make sure that our cards have a lot of impact in the late game. And the same basically goes for the Strangleroot Geist, for the Werewolves, and so on. So both Werewolves and Morbid and simply having a 7-drop mean that our late game is going to be quite good. Of course, Tragic Slip, Deadweight, and Prey Upon complement this with the removal spells, basically. I think it's pretty clear that we are playing too many creatures and that we don't really want to cut any of our spells, simply because they are too good in the deck we are building. So I think that we have to analyze what the worst creatures in this build are, depending on our overall game plan, on the mana consistency, but also on the curve. So it's really a multi-dimensional problem we are facing. And if I look at simply power level, I think Brain Weevil is probably the worst of the cards here. I like the Pilgrim because we do want to play quite a lot of high-end cards. The Weevil is great with the Bear and the 5-drops, but especially the 5-drops are all quite good even without Morbid. So you can play them defensively, and of course it would be better if they had Morbid. But for example, with the Scavenger, it's still very good to simply drop a 4/5 onto the battlefield. So I don't think we should overdo the Morbid theme here. With the 2-drops, I think Interloper, the Dryad, and Highborn Ghoul are the weakest, and that's because the potential evasion they offer is simply not something which is very important in our deck. In fact, an evasive creature is much less likely to trigger Morbid, and a simple 2-mana unblockable is not going to present a serious clock, which means that these 3 2-drops also don't add that much to our overall game plan, because our game plan is going to be to play a longer game, a grindy game where our good cards take over after some fighting, which means that Tragic Slip and Prey Upon are going to be very important to handle the best cards in our opponent's deck, hopefully. So if I have to cut 2 cards, I think it has to be Brain Weevil and a 2-drop, or maybe even 2 of the 2-drops. But then again, any 2-drop has the potential to... well, it has kind of more turns to have an effect on the game. Brain Weevil, on the other hand, is going to be good against a control-ish deck and going to trigger Morbid as an additional bonus. However, it's quite a clunky card. So overall, I think if we look at the mana of our deck, we are very heavily green, and we don't have that many black cards. Only the Ghoul, Tragic Slip, and Deadweight, and then 1 double black card. So if we decide to cut 2 black cards, we also improve our mana significantly. So I don't really like that the Interloper can't block, but it's single black instead of double black, which means it's going to be much easier to cast. And Somberwald Dryad has the disadvantage that it can be blocked if the opponent doesn't have forests, but that could actually be an advantage for us, given that we also have the Morbid synergy. So it might be the best choice for us given our mana. So I think if we add up Interloper and Dryad and cut Brainweevil and Highborn Ghoul for now, we are doing a good thing for our mana, and also don't weaken the overall strategy of our deck too much. Vampire Interloper, not a card we really want in this deck, but it's still, I think, a powerful 2-drop, which we will manage to play. And if the opponent has flyers, we probably just board it out, because it's going to be dominated too often. So with this setup, we now have to think about the mana base, and of course we are going to need a lot of green, but it's not that bad. If we have a single green, we can cast everything but Strangleroot Geist in the early game, and once we reach 4, 5, and 7 mana, we should have quite a lot of green sources as well. Now, playing all of this means that we only have 14 sources left, but of course Shimmering Grotto and Evolving Wilds also help to fix the black splash, if you want to call it, and we can basically play a lot of forests in addition. So if we would like 7 black sources, counting both of these, we could get away with only playing 5 Swamps, and that would leave us with 9 forests, which we could count as 9 to 10, maybe 11 green sources, which is fine, but also necessary, because we do need at least 1 forest, and we want to draw more in the later stages of the game. So it's possible that we could play something like this instead of a 16th land, instead of the 17th land, but I think it's not really necessary to do so. Now, going with 5 swamps and 9 forests here seems like a good trade-off between mana consistency and power level. Given that Mourne of the Unhallowed is just such a good card, I always want it in my black decks. So, depending on what our opponent throws at us, we can board in Brainweevil, Naturalize, Highborn Ghoul, maybe even the Disciple, Make a Wish. We have quite a lot of sideboard cards, but this looks like a good main deck. So let's see how it goes.